So after 9/11, our government, all of us recognized we were blind to threat. We didn't know who the bad guys were talking to inside our country and vice versa. So our government created the Foreign Internal Surveillance Act, FISA, and some secret courts that allow FBI agents, intelligence world to do warrantless wiretaps of communications coming from external to internal, and then by extension, internal to external. So basically spying on Americans without a warrant.
Right.
So if you go back to our Constitution, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects us from that, illegal search and seizure. But our Congress at that time wrote new law that allowed for that right, our privilege to be protected, to basically be overridden. Over the past 20 years, that power, anytime we give government more power, make things easier for the government to get into our lives, they're not going to give that back.
Yeah.
And they're certainly not going to use it correctly.
Yeah.
And so over the last 20 years of having this unlimited power to search our records, essentially, external to internal, without a warrant, the government's abused that. That power was set to expire last year, 2023.
Okay.
So lots of arguments. Hey, we need this power. We're going to be blind if we don't have it. We don't know who the bad guys are talking to.
Yeah.
But Senator Lee, our senator, and others, Rand Paul, thankfully dug into this, and they have been for years, trying to blow the horn, saying, hey, the government is abusing this power. And they cited, more recently last fall, Senator Lee in an open hearing with the FBI director, cited hundreds of thousands of times where FBI agents without warrants illegally accessed these records.
Yeah.
Examples, they pulled records of people who've donated to Trump, FBI agents that worked in the Biden administration without warrants.
Yeah.
So if you donated to Trump, if I did, if anyone, they were pulling your records.
I think even they were using that as an argument to say if you reposted on social media
January 6th or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like any extension of conspiracy, right? They're kind of lump in this whole thing as like this is a Patriot Act type event of saying, well, we can survey and find out information about any American for basically any reason that we want, right?
Yes.
Is that
without
right?
a warrant.
Yeah. Without no judge to stamp it. It completely eliminates the ability for the judicial system to check the power of the executive branch, right?
So exactly. So you're already tracking on it. So that power was set to expire. Senator Lee was adamant we can't continue to rubber stamp this.
This thing has to stop.
Has to stop. And the FBI's rebuttal was, well, we're going to fix it. We're going to put in more regulations.
Later.
Wink, wink.
Yeah,
like
later.
we've been saying we would do for 20 years.
Right.
So the opportunity to squash that and stop it was last December.
Right.
So that was attached to the Defense Authorization Bill at NDAA, which I worked on for 9 years when I was in Washington, D.C. I'm intimately familiar with this bill. So for Celeste or anyone to say he doesn't know what he's talking about, no, I've worked on it longer than she has.
Yeah.
So the thought of me voting no on that is painful because I am in the military. My daughter's in the military. But we can defend our civil rights and our nation at the same time.
Yeah.
Too often here in Congress, we hear our politicians, the establishment, say, well, it's either yes or no. But it's not binary like that.
Right.
There's a third choice. Do your job.
Yeah.
Don't just vote yes because I don't want to do my job. Don't just vote yes out of fear. You can vote no on principle or yes on principle, but you do your job.
Yeah.
So instead of standing up for that abuse of power, Celeste rubber stamped it and passed it through.
Yeah.
With the rationale that, hey, I support the military. We'll fix it later.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, it's offensive to put something that's unconstitutional, abuse of government power on the backs of our military. Now, the military's wheels are not going to drop off. The military is not going to explode by not passing that. Yeah. That forces Congress to do its job. The NDA will ultimately get passed. The military will continue just fine.
Right.
But all too often, it's business as usual. Mm-hmm. And it's evident that there was another choice because people made that choice. Yeah. Senator Lee voted no. Senator Romney voted yes. Mm-hmm. Celeste voted with Senator Romney and not with Senator Lee on this critical issue.
I think Representative Curtis voted no as well. Correct?
He did. Yep.
He voted no on that as well, which I thought was really fascinating. Is how we're the Utah delegation. There's only 6 of us.
Yes.
We only get 6 voices. There's 53, 56 in California, right? It's like it's interesting to me. One of the candidates for the Senate seat keeps calling it the ruby red state, right? Mm-hmm. How we're like, we're this red conservative state and we have these values and fundamentals and, that's what gives us strength and things like that. Yet within this particular topic, our own delegation is split on this.
Literally split. And interesting point, this past Saturday night at the Washington County Lincoln Day dinner, I had a gentleman come at me quite aggressive on this issue, saying,
I know I got the survey results on it, and I was like, I'm fascinated with these poll results, because I'm like, this is so interesting to me. It's like, how are these numbers making sense? I just don't get it.
So, on the straw poll?
Yeah, on the straw poll that they did. It's anyway. Keep going. What
we'll talk about that for sure. But this gentleman came at me, clearly a Celeste supporter, and was arguing that, hey, this wasn't unconstitutional. This is the law. The government can do this. And I just listened to him, and he was saying, show me any bill that doesn't have something wrong with it. Right. Senator Lee he always votes no. Like that didn't have anything to do with the issue. He just is always a no vote. And I just smiled, shook my head, and I wasn't snarky back with him, but in my mind I'm thinking, you are the exact example of the establishment.
Yeah.
You are the reason that we are in this mess. Yeah. Because in your mind you can rationalize this vote, this position, to make it yes. Mm-hmm. When back to our Constitution, to our founders, that is not okay. Yeah. And so I just had to chuckle inside, thinking that you can rationalize your fear and your lack of principle all day long, but at the end of the day, that jeopardizes our nation. Yeah,
it's just a weird way that we use fear too, because no matter what the topic is, you can use fear to manipulate either side of the agreement. But I think the whole point of having a constitution and these real clear set rules that we're just all supposed to fall into, and I think it's a lack of problem solving. It's almost like the elected officials are less interested in working hard to creatively, and I use the word creatively loosely, because creativity isn't necessarily what we should be leading with. We should be leading with experience and like proven, like this has been done in the past specifically for a reason. We don't have to keep remaking the wheel, right? Yeah. But when we have a difficult problem like this, is I guess the assumption being we can't monitor or survey the population and organizing internally within our own borders to protect ourselves from another terrorist attack, right? Yeah. And I think the same logic goes as if we don't continue to fund this overseas war and keep the battle there instead of at home, then that's going to somehow undermine our ability to protect our own borders, right? Yeah. And so it's using, facts A and B to justify this fact F over here. They're correlated, but they're not causal. There's no direct connection, right? And we do this over and over again. It's so interesting to me that we continue to fall into it. Yeah. But that establishment, I think the incumbents win 80+% of the time. Yep. And it's not helpful. Yes. It's not helpful. Yeah. It's not helpful for replenishing that liberty piece that the founding fathers kind of envisioned when we started moving forward with this whole experiment. For sure. Right? And pulling on that thread a little bit more, how the establishment protects itself. And to be clear, I am not a one issue candidate. Like I am not running just because of that vote that Celeste compromised our Constitution and our liberty. I mean, that's a huge thing. Right. But that's indicative of a trend. That's indicative of the lack of experience and judgment, and how the establishment has truly wrapped its arms around Celeste. Mm-hmm. So if you rewind a little bit, and from my experience, when I filed in January to be a candidate, when I sat in the lieutenant governor's boardroom area of the conference room where we were registered, they looked up to see if I was a registered Republican, and I was a registered Republican in Utah at the time I filed. Mm-hmm. When Celeste filed last year, she was not in the special election, but the government just did a hand wave. It's like the Jedi. This is not the candidate you're looking for.
And some candidates actually sued her to claiming, hey, by the rules, you were not eligible to be a candidate. Uh-huh. Now that was found to be okay in court. So, hey, that's the law. We move on. But ask yourself, why is there one standard for one person and one different for the other?
Yeah, that's an important question.
And then to follow up on that some more, voting. Why was she not a registered Republican? Well, she hadn't voted in so many elections recently that the Utah Republican Party dropped her from the rolls. Hadn't even voted. Yeah. So now to stand here in front of you and I and ask for our vote when the right and the privilege to vote wasn't even on her radar for multiple years, to me is offensive. I've spent 30 years with the patch of the American flag on my shoulder, putting my life, not literally on the line, but being willing to support and defend the Constitution, and by extension, our right to vote, and to have a member of Congress ask for my vote, or someone trying, and not even want to be serious about that right is offensive to me. And it's important. So I don't want to run a negative campaign, but it's important that people see these contrasts in judgment, in accountability, in experience, in just being a serious candidate, a person who wants to be a true public servant to those who they are asking to represent.
So many times, I mean, people vote for the oddest reasons, right? And so, there's only certain, and we kind of talked on this a little bit, is we can get mired down in individual policy issues, why this person voted for this or that reason. And I think a lot of times we can rationalize our own thoughts, and it's got to be a tough thing to either decide yes or no, right? Or abstain, right? We have the opportunity to just not vote, right? Yeah. But when you're in this system where there's pressure from lots of different angles. Yeah. I could see how it's not an easy gig. You're trying to compromise, which I don't really love the idea of compromising, meaning that this thing is less important than this thing. But we do have to prioritize, okay, if I'm going to play a chess game, sometimes you got to lose your bishop so you could take the rook, right? Especially from like a military tactics perspective. But at a certain point, your life's not on the line. Your decision to say no and stand up for this thing that you know to be right, or you believe in, your value, if that means the party doesn't support you on your next election, or if that means the citizens don't elect you next time around, well, that's just part of playing the game. You could actually just go home and live in your house, and you could actually just go on with your life and continue to operate in the greatest country in the world, right? Yeah.